Hi, folks. This is Lee W. Mowen, the host of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. I've been hosting my podcast on Anchor for some time now, and let me tell you why it's the easiest way to make a podcast. When you host with Anchor, you have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or phone. Anchor then distributes your podcast for you so others can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can even make some money with your podcast with no minimum listenership required. And best of all, it's 100% free. It truly is the one-stop shop for those looking to start a podcast. To start, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor. Day 2 of Streak Week here on the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. And up next will be episode 157 with Mike Hartsock. You'll get to hear that episode in just a moment. Just for those that haven't heard, this is Streak Week here, which means we have 8 days of 8 new episodes, a new episode each and every day. We have done that from the previous episode with Jacob Wise, and we'll do that until episode 163 with Matt Sexton. Definitely looking forward to releasing all these episodes. 8 great interviews, and I think you're going to enjoy each and every one of them. So without further ado, we'll send it off to the episode, but not before we have a couple words from our new network partner in 12 Ounce Sports. Hey folks, this is Lee W. Mowen of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast, and I'm here to talk to you about MyBookie. Since 2014, it's the place where you can bet on anything, anywhere, anytime. Get up to $1,000 on your first deposit bonus. Use the promo code 12OZSports. As well as sports betting, you can play some casino games, take in some live odds in Madden 20 and NBA 2K20, and even bet with Bitcoin. Visit mybookie.ag and use that promo code 12OZSports. That's 12OZSports. MyBookie, the industry's most rewarding loyalty program. 12 Ounce Sports. Visit us at 12ouncesportsradio.com. On episode 157 of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast, our special guest is Mike Hartsock, longtime sports anchor of WHIO Channel 7, Dayton's CBS affiliate. We're talking local sports in a career that spans several decades.
Stay right there.
Welcome to the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. This is a weekly podcast covering all sports in Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio. From Lima to the Ohio River and northern Kentucky, from eastern Indiana to Madison County and all points in between, this is your source of local Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio sports. Visit the leewmowen.com/podcasts to find your favorite podcasting platform. Music created with the Splash app. Time for another episode with your host, Lee W. Mowen. On the phone right now is Mike Hartsock. You might know him from WHIO TV Channel 7, the CBS affiliate in Dayton. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm good, Lee. How about you?
I'm all right. Just wishing sports were back.
Yeah, you and me both. I spent 6 to 8 weeks, I guess it is, after covering news, basically, rather than sports. After I flew up on March 12th to New York to cover Dayton in the Atlantic 10 tournament. I was there that morning at the arena when they called off the tournament and did my stories that day, changed my flight, came back the next morning, and I basically haven't moved in place since, except here in my office and working from home, but covering news for the most part.
Well, at least you're staying busy through all this.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Yeah, and things are slowly starting to come back. I mean, I like everybody else, am a bit perplexed that baseball is doing what they're doing, but I think I don't know. If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago what the be a baseball season, I would have told you yes. If you asked me now, I I think that most of us, I'm not sure if I'm in the minority or the majority here. Frankly, I don't care. I'm at a point where I don't care anymore. I'm tired of millionaires and millionaires arguing over money, and it's just one of those things that I'll watch it if it comes, but I'm not going to be too interested in a 50-game season.
I understand that, and plus the fact is they're talking about Major League, but about the minor leagues, since, I work with the Dragons.
Yeah, the minor league's not going to happen. I mean, that's a given. There's not going to be a minor league season, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it is something that's just not going to happen because, unlike the major leagues, who can make money by holding games with no fans in the stands, the minor league teams can't. They don't have big TV contracts that are going to pay them to put games on TV. So their money is made with people in the stands, and that's just not going to happen this year.
It's a shame, but what can you do?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Mike, where are you from?
I'm from Waynesville. Originally, I've been lucky enough that my whole 43-year career total has been within a half hour of where I grew up. So when I got out of college, I went to Eastern Kentucky. When I got out of college, I got a job in Middletown at WPFB Radio, and I was reporting news in Warren County, and I started doing play-by-play for them because back in the day, WPFB in Middletown did play-by-play of everything. If it moved, they did play-by-play. We did. I did slow pitch softball. I did soapbox derby. I did a little bit of everything at PFB, and then I came up here and got started radio for a year here, and then moved over to TV, and I've been here for 41 years. So,
not only is it miraculous that you got a career just about 30 minutes away from your hometown of Waynesville, but you've been here for 40-plus years.
Yeah. It's odd in my in this side of the business, the TV side. People move a lot because they want to move up markets. They want to test themselves, and I've been lucky that when I was a kid growing up, we used to watch Channel 7. I mean, I'd come home, and my dad would come home from work, and we'd all sit there at the dinner table, and in the other room there'd be Don Wayne, on TV. And so that was what I grew up watching. And so when I came here and I got to work with Don Wayne and Jim Baldridge, that was just the coolest thing in the world to me. And it's one of those things that, I've never really wanted to go anyplace else. I've had a couple of offers to go different places, but nothing was just going to be good enough that it was going to take me away from here.
And you mentioned Jim Baldridge. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get into broadcasting, because I remember as a kid watching him on the news. And
yeah,
I mean, you're still there. Not Hartsock, sorry. You're a Hartsock. Baldridge retired a few years back now, but
yeah, it's been about 10 years now since Jim retired. He's down in Florida. He's down in Fort Myers, Naples area, enjoying his retirement.
That's crazy. 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned watching Channel 7 when you were young, but what was the exact moment you said, hey, I want to be a broadcaster?
Well, it was my uncle that got me involved in it. My uncle, Jim Hartsock, his on-air name was Jim Sears. He worked at WING and a couple of other radio stations in the Dayton area, and I used to. I remember one time I went to the radio station with him and I watched him do his air shift, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And so I thought it was cool that here was a guy who was spinning records and being a top 40 DJ. So that's kind of what got me into it. But then once I got involved and I was at Eastern and through 4 years of going through it, when I came out of college, I was a behind-the-scenes guy. My main role was producing and directing newscasts and documentaries and that kind of stuff. But when I got out of college, I looked for jobs for about 3 months, and the only thing that came along was an on-air job at PFB. So I had to put on my on-air hat, and I haven't taken it off since.
It's a shame that, hearing PFB, I don't know if they exist anymore or not, but they don't have the play-by-play anymore like they used to.
No, they still exist. The still radio station's still there, and I think I believe they might still do some games, but I'm not sure they don't do anywhere near what we did. I mean, it was rare back then, even in the late 70s when I was there. I mean, like they did all the other stuff, but we'd go to the boys state basketball tournament in Columbus, whether we had anybody locally playing or not. We would do all the games on WPFB. Well, I mean, we would do St. Edward out of Cleveland against somebody out of Columbus. We'd do that semifinal or final. It was just one of those things. It really gave me the opportunity to hone my play-by-play stuff. And then luckily when I came here to HIO, I did the high school game of the week for them for a couple of years. And then once I went over to the sports side, I was, for 8 or 9 years, I was the color analyst for Dayton Basketball TV. And then when McHubert left to go to Florida, I took over as the play-by-play guy. And I probably did 25 years of that, 26, 27 years of that. We haven't done Dayton basketball in about 5 years now because we let the contract go and went in a different direction. So,
how much do you miss broadcasting Flyer basketball on TV?
I miss it a lot, but I miss the games. But the one thing I really miss, and I did it. I was lucky enough to do it through every coach, from Donaher on. I used to do coaches shows every Sunday, and that's the one thing I really missed because that was my opportunity to get a look inside Dayton basketball that nobody else really got. Because I would, when Donaher was the head coach, Donaher would come in on Sundays. We'd do it live then, and I'd have to edit the tape of the highlights of the games, and he'd be here before I got here, and he would sit down and he'd watch me cut the tape, and basically it was a coaching view, because I'd cut a highlight and he'd go run that back, and I'd run it back for him. Run that back again. So what would normally take me about a half an hour to cut highlights usually took an hour and a half. So we'd get there. I would always meet him at like 7:30 in the morning because I knew it was going to take long. And I really have to get there early if they hadn't played well that week because it really got to him. And I knew it was really going to take a lot of time. But what I was getting at from Don Donaher all the way up to Archie Miller, who's the last coach that I worked with, doing coaches shows. Those coaches all knew that when we were sitting in my office talking before the coaches show and going over tape and that kind of stuff, that anything they said in that office wasn't on the record. It was just two of us sitting there talking about basketball. And that gave me the opportunity to find out so much, and it helped me, in my play-by-play stuff because I knew stuff. Now, I wouldn't say, well, Coach Donaher said this, but I'd be able to take the stuff that I heard and turn it around in a broadcast that gave people an insight that they probably wouldn't have.
You got a little insight for your play-by-play and a little bit more knowledge.
A lot.
And you got to bring out a great live product at the time, too, for fans.
Yeah, that's for sure.
What has changed from year one at WHIO to today, 2020?
Well, technology, for one thing, but I don't know where we would be without the Internet. I don't know how we survived without the Internet. It used to be I'd sit at my desk and get my sportscast together, and I would, pull up the AP wires and, AP and UPI, and I'd have my different wires that I'd, look for sports shows on. Well, we don't even have AP anymore. I mean, I think we do to a certain extent, but it's not the sports AP that we used to have. So, all of my information I'm getting off ESPN, CBSSports.com, Twitter. I don't get much out of Facebook. Twitter's something that's really good to use as far as finding out facts. But the thing about the internet, obviously, and everybody knows this now, you can't take it as the gospel. You've got to. Once you see a story, you better fact check it 3 or 4 times to make sure it's true, because there are just some weird people out there that like to post stuff that's not true.
Yeah, but when it is true, social media and the access of news and rumors and everything, it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's just it, and that's the weirdest thing too anymore. There's, in our business anymore, we used to talk about scooping somebody. If I had a story nobody else had, I scooped somebody. But you really don't scoop anybody anymore, because you may see it on bleacherreport.com or something like that, and you still acknowledge that they had it, but it's no big deal that you didn't, because there are so many different eyeballs on everything that a scoop is not something that happens very often.
In an average year at WHIO, what all do you cover?
Oh gosh, I cover baseball, and baseball includes the Reds, the Dragons, high school baseball, all the way to the state tournament. We cover softball, girls softball. Try to cover a little bit of track. Track's one thing that's never really. It's hard. It's hard to translate track to TV, because it's just different than most. So those are your spring, summer sports for the most part. Then we go into the fall, and I've got high school football with Touchdown 7 that just celebrated 30 years of doing high school football with that format. You do University of Dayton football, we do Wittenberg football, do Central State football, and Ohio State. And then the Bengals. I mean, it used to be when I had staff. I mean, when I started this job as the sports director in 1989, I had me and 5 other people. Wow. Now I've just got me. And so back in the day when we were doing a lot of stuff, I would send if the Bengals and the Browns were both playing at home, I'd send a crew 3.5 hours away up to Cleveland to cover that game, and I'd send somebody else, or probably me, go down to the Bengals game and cover that one. And we did a lot more stuff that way. And then, of course, you jump into basketball, and Dayton and Wright State basketball, and we try to get a little bit of Wittenberg in there as well. It's just so hard anymore to cover so many teams. We try to cover some high school soccer for the most part, but like I said, when you're a one-person department, there's not a lot of opportunities to get the stuff that sometimes is fringe. It's not fringe to people playing it or the parents watching it if it's high school sports. But that's the other thing. When I first started, I got 4 minutes at 6:00 in a sportscast, and 5 minutes, I think, at 11. Well, now I don't even do a 6:00 sports Monday through Friday. I only do a weekend 6:00 sports, and I get 3 minutes for that. And then my 11:00 show is 3.5. I do that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So those things have changed, and and you have to remember, when I first started this, sports was more important than weather. Sport, even used to be weather finished up a newscast. Now weather is in 3 times an hour, half an hour, and sports is the last thing you see before we say goodbye. So a lot of things change thanks to consultants.
And that's a shame too. I mean, weather is important, but local sports are too. You see how communities just rise with them, and that's a shame.
Yeah, it just all depends. It all depends on how much stock you put into research and consultants, and we put a lot of stock into it here. We our research company is Maggot Consultants, and they're the biggest in the business, and they do their research. And I've been on a number of meetings with the Maggot people, and they get tired of me after a while, because when you're in meetings with people that go, people don't watch local news for sports, they watch ESPN. And I raise my hand and say, I didn't see that Centerville Beaver Creek football game on ESPN. And they'll go, well, you know what I mean. I said, no, I don't. I'm sorry. You're wrong on that part. And but they don't want to hear that they're wrong. They get paid to be right. So.
And that's a shame. I mean, you can hear national news on ESPN, but local news, ESPN's not going to cover that. Yeah.
No, it's the way it is, and that's the way. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going to be. And I don't know what's. I don't have a good crystal ball. I mean, I've done this for 41 years, and I just turned 65, and frankly, I'm on the very back end of my career doing this. Once I leave here, I'm not sure what we're going to do. I don't know that we'll still do sports. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But it all depends on management and what they want to do, So, I mean, that's kind of a dicey thing right now, and it's a thing that thankfully I don't have to worry about once I leave. That's for somebody else to worry about, not me.
Now, you have a very popular catchphrase, so popular that former radio talk show host Mark Schlemmer does an impersonation.
A bad impersonation, by the way. A real bad impersonation.
Yeah, I don't like tooting my own horn on my own podcast, but I think I do a little bit better. But what is the history of Stay Right There?
Well, the history is, back in the day when I was doing sports, whether it was 6 or 11 o'clock, we always had a commercial break that divided sports. We'd do the first part of our sports cast, and then I'd have like 45 seconds to a minute coming out of a commercial. So basically, I just started. I'd have some tease video, and I'd roll the tease video, and I'd talk over it, and I'd say, high school basketball gearing up for another big state tournament run. Got that story coming up next, so stay right there. And it was just the stay right there was just that. It was just stay right there. And then as it developed, I started dragging it out a little bit for whatever reason. I don't know that I consciously started dragging it out, but it started dragging out, and it kind of became something that people like to hear, or most people like to hear. But then one day, I remember Skip Hafner came to me and he said, "Hey, you need to stop saying the stay right there thing. Our consultants think it sounds like 1960s radio." And I said, "Huh?" And he said, "Yeah, you just don't say that anymore." I said, "Okay, fine." So I stopped saying it. And I think this was like in July. And he came back to me in the 1st of September. And he goes, "Hey, never mind. You can go ahead and stay right there again." I said, "Well, what changed?" He goes, "We got a lot of calls." I said, "Oh, okay. So the consultants weren't right then." We got a lot of calls. They wouldn't say the consultants weren't right, but because we got a lot of calls, they decided to let me say it. So, but the thing about it is now, my sportscast is basically, it's all one thing, but there's no commercial break. So the only time I get to stay right there anymore is on Saturdays and Sundays, because we have a sports tease that runs in the commercial break, right before the commercial break before sports. So I still get to say it on Saturdays and Sundays, but that's about it.
It's a shame too, because I remember as a kid that was on every day.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'd say it all the time. But that's that a lot of stuff has gone by the way. People that have watched us for the time that I've been doing this. So they probably also remember we used to do a nightly fishing report, and it ran at the end of the show, at the end of Sportscast at 11 o'clock every night. And basically, it was a solar lunar graph that the fishing report was based on the tides, high tide, low tide, even in Ohio. And so we had this graph, and I'd say, well, okay, looking to fish tomorrow. It's going to be good, between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And we didn't do it we did it like, I want to say March through October, the winter months. It was obviously a little bit too cold to fish in the winter. But so people always used to give me a hard time about, hey, it's all a fishing report, and there after a while, we turned that into something called Fish Tales, where we'd run the fishing report, and then we'd have people send us in pictures of fish they caught. So we'd show their pictures of fish. So that's what TV sports is always trying to make something out of something else. And I think I've gotten pretty good at that after a while.
You also had a podcast with that name. Stay right there, too.
I did a podcast, and I did it for about 10 months, I guess. I did a weekly podcast, and it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I guess it was about 7 or 8 months, something like that. I enjoyed doing it, but with everything else I had going on my plate, because once again, I'm a one-person department. It got difficult to do, and I just kind of let it slide away, and nobody in management has said anything to me about it, so I'm just kind of letting it go, probably for the foreseeable future. So, but I enjoyed doing it. It had some fun guests.
I enjoyed listening to it as well. It was neat to hear about the local athletes and everything.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of your favorite things about Dayton sports and this area of sports?
My favorite stuff that I cover is high school athletes. I mean, I've been lucky enough. When you look at the overall sports thing, I've been lucky enough to cover Dayton in the Elite Eight basketball tournament, NCAA tournament, twice. I've been lucky enough to cover the Bengals in 2 Super Bowls. I covered the Reds wire to wire in the 1990 World Series. I covered the 1996 Olympics down in Atlanta. I've done a lot of stuff. And, I've been to a lot of different places, but when it gets right down to it, give me the high school kids. That's what I like to talk about, even though high school kids are a challenge, because if you get somebody that can intelligently talk at their level at 16, 17 years old, that's you're kind of ahead of the game. But I enjoy talking to the kids and hearing their stories and telling their stories. But don't get me wrong, the college and pro stuff is where the most interest is, of sports fans. But I enjoy the high school stuff more than anything, because think about our job now. And it's been this way for 25 years probably, at least, is, you have to understand doing this job anymore that the majority of people watching your sportscast don't care about sports. They just don't. They're just there in the newscast, and you're there as they have the newscast on. So if I've got a 3.5 minute newscast, I've got to get your attention in the first 30 seconds or I've lost it. So that's the hard thing for me. And that's always been the challenge for me, is to grab somebody's attention and keep it. And, I think that's something a lot of people don't do anymore.
You mentioned the Elite Eight for UD, but what are some of your favorite moments and stories getting to cover sports? The toughest one for me, because I'm a kid from Waynesville growing up, and I used to go to Crosley Field and watch Pete Rose play
I watched the Reds play with Pete Rose when Pete was a rookie. And so the toughest thing for me was covering Pete being banned from baseball, because over my time doing this job, I've gotten to know Pete pretty well, and Pete has always been really good to me. So it was hard to cover Pete Rose when he was going through that, because I guess that's probably the first time I ever really, and because that happened in 89, I was doing sports for like 7 years by then, and that was always the hardest thing. And the thing I learned that to do this job right, you can't be a fan, and there are still people that do this, that do, whether it's sports talk radio or TV or whatever, that you can be a fan and your fandom shows through. You really can't do that if you want to be objective, and you want people to really believe that you're being objective in what you're talking about. And, so many people always thought that I hated Wright State because I was a Dayton guy, because I did the Dayton basketball games. Well, that was my job. My job was to do play-by-play of Dayton basketball on TV. So was I a Dayton fan? Sure. But I've always been a Wright State fan too, even back to the days with Ralph Underhill. Ralph Underhill and Jim Brown, when they were coaching, that was a whole lot of fun to cover those guys and their teams. But, all the Wright State people always used to say, he's a Dayton guy, not a Wright State guy. But, the thing about it is you can't please everybody in this business. And if you try too hard at it, you're going to fail at what you really want to do.
It is a shame, but yeah, absolutely. Especially when Vitaly Potapenko was at Wright State and the Division II national championship. That was a lot of fun, I bet.
Yeah, now the Division II national championship, I was on the very beginning of my sports career when that was happening. So they were still playing in the old PE building, and I can remember going out to cover some of those games, and they didn't have much in the way of crowds back then, but once they started getting really good, they packed that place. And but that was a fun time to cover. And there have been so many opportunities. I've been to Maui 3 times with Dayton basketball. I've been, I've gotten to do a lot of stuff that this kid from Waynesville never thought that he would ever get to do. So it's I've been pretty lucky.
Now, how has the coronavirus affected you and your job?
Oh, well, I've come in every day during the whole thing. We've had a lot of people work from home, but I've pretty much been in every day to get stuff done. And when it first hit, sports went away. I did some sports for a couple of weeks, and then my boss said, "Mike, what are we going to do here? I need some help on news." And I said, "Well, that's me." So I started covering news stories, and I did that for, like I said, 6-7 weeks. And then once things started to get kind of, I don't want to say normal because it's not normal now, but once things started to quiet down a little bit, I went to him and I said, I really need to start doing sports again on a regular basis and back to my normal shift. And I did. And so now, we're to a point now where, the PGA Tour is coming back this week, and NASCAR is going to start on Sunday with people in the stands. And, I think that things are going to start leveling off a little bit. The thing that scares me a little bit is to see what happens with football season, and then couple that with what's going to happen in basketball season. Are we going to get 13,000 fans a night at UD at the arena? I doubt it. I don't know that that's going to be ready to be done in November, but I don't know. I didn't think there was much hope that I mean, you talked to me 3 weeks ago and asked me if I thought that high school football would start on time, and I would have told you no way, because I didn't think any high school was going to get back to school before the 1st of September. But now I think we might be pretty close to on time with all that stuff. What the games are going to look like, I don't know as far as fans in the stands, but I think there will be some. I just don't know how many.
I hope so, because I'm looking forward to this high school football season. And going down to Cincinnati and doing play-by-play. So
we shall see.
We shall see. Just a few more questions.
Okay.
For those interested in joining the broadcasting field, what advice can you give someone?
Look elsewhere. No, just kidding.
You're the first person that said that.
The business is not what it used to be. There are so many people that there's still a lot of people out there that look and go, I love sports, and I know more about sports than anybody does. Well, that's great, but you also have to have the ability to tell a story. And, so many people just want to get in there and do a story and tell you this stat compared to this stat, and this is what happened. That's not sports anymore, because that's going to bore people to tears, and they're going to turn you off. Because, like I said, most of the people watching you in a sportscast are not sports fans; they're just viewers, and so you have to work around them and be able to to present your product the right way. What do I tell people that want to do this? Well, you have to be open to a lot of things. If you're going to school for a broadcasting degree, you better come out with your degree, with some experience on campus and through some internships, which are harder to do now that we have COVID-19. Mm-hmm. But the thing about it is, you also have to, you can't have that tunnel vision of I'm doing sports. You've got to be willing to do news and do this and do that, because the days of people specializing in sports are gone. Even when I started back in 1979, when I first came up, at PFB, and then came here in the early 80s. I came here as a news reporter, and I just kind of bided my time. I let them know that I'd like to do sports if they wanted me to, and that's how I got a job. I went from news to sports. So it's still the same. You still have to have an open mind. The business is, but you have to understand, the business is not what it used to be, and it never will be again. The sports side of things is a part of our business, and the TV side that is losing popularity with an audience. That's what research shows us, whether I agree with consultants or not, that's what research shows us. So you have to have the ability to be flexible. You can want to do sports, but it's one of those things that is harder and harder every year to find jobs and be able to do it.
As a longtime media worker in Dayton, what would you like to see in the market in terms of sports and media in the near future?
I've preached this to a lot of people, and maybe it will happen now because of what we've gone through with the coronavirus. I've told our smaller schools, as far as colleges go, for years, that, with Wittenberg and even Wright State and Dayton to a certain extent, when you're looking at lesser sports, I've always told them that the easier you can make my job for me, the better off you're going to be. In other words, if you can send somebody in the sports information department out with a camera and get me some video of the women's softball team practicing, and then do a couple of quick interviews with the coach and a player and send that to me, somehow or in an email or whatever, I'm probably going to use that. Now, I'm not going to have the ability to get out there and get that because I'm a one-person department. But if you can send it to me, and this goes for high school athletes and everything else. I can't get to a lot of different high schools to do previews for your season or your tournament or whatever. But if you can send it to me, shoot it and send it to me, it's probably going to have a really good chance to get on TV. And that's the thing that's really changing. The thing that's even more important now, we have this streaming channel now, WHIO streaming channel, and we have the ability to put a lot of stuff on the streaming channel that I don't even have time for to put on the TV sportscast. So that's the thing that's going to change the most. But the thing about it is, it will be changing long after I'm gone from this job, and you just don't know where it's going. 5 years from now, I'm not sure what sports on a local TV newscast will look like. I have my doubts that it will even look remotely like it does now. I don't know. We'll see.
Mike, how can people watch your work and follow you on social media?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I try to be on Instagram a little bit, but I don't get that format all that much as far as my interest in what I'm on Twitter more than I'm on most things because I think it adds to what we do in our business. I think it's more of a sports thing. So I'm at M Hartsock WHIO on Twitter. And so I think it's similar to that. If you just search Mike Hartsock on Twitter or Facebook, you'll find both of them. But that's primarily where I'm at on social media. I don't do as much as my bosses would like me to, but because fact of the matter is, I'm an old guy, and the new tricks of social media are kind of difficult for me sometimes. But I still enjoy doing them. And then of course I'm on the newscasts Wednesday through Sunday.
Last question, and this one, I remember watching it while I was in high school. What happened to the Touchdown 7 chopper?
Well, it wasn't really a Touchdown 7 chopper. It was a Channel 7 chopper.
Right.
We used it for a variety of different things. And gosh, how many years? It's probably been 10, 12 years that it's been gone. And it was a money thing. The chopper cost us, I'm wanting to say it cost us $500,000 a year to use that helicopter. We had a certain number of hours that we were contracted for using it. So, and sports was a part of that. And, so we were able to use it with that. But anymore, it's just, there are very, very few stations that have helicopters that they use anymore. And hell, we've got we don't have a helicopter anymore, but we've got 5 drones, I think. So we have a lot of people, and me not included, but we have a lot of people that fly drones, and but the rules with drones are a little bit different because you have to watch yourself where you fly over crowds and that kind of stuff. But, I enjoyed the chopper in my years of doing it because it was I was never obviously a pilot, but I learned a lot about helicopter flying in the time that I was able to get up in one.
I think the last time the Channel 7 chopper landed at Valley View, I think it was Spartans versus Fairborn in 2004, and the Skyhawks won that game pretty handedly.
That sounds about right, but it's for the most part it was a good time. I'll leave you with my one helicopter story that I tell from time to time when I was flying. We were flying one night. We were going to Greenville on a Friday night for a game, and we whenever I would do these preparations, I would call the athletic director and I would say, are there any wires going across the field that we need to be aware of? And they usually say no. But then I would always send the pilot out to kind of do a drive-by so he could make sure and take a closer look. Well, he always would do that on Fridays. That Friday, we were busy with some kind of breaking news story. We had the helicopter. He couldn't get out there. So he picks me up, and it was later in the year. It was kind of around, where dusk was setting in at the time. And so we're coming in over the stadium out there in Greenville. I always had this thing. We had a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter, larger helicopter. Whenever we would come in, we'd always come in over one end zone, or whether it's scoreboard or not, but we'd come over the one end zone of the goalpost, and I would always turn around and look just to make sure the tail rotor was going to clear the goalpost. It wasn't my responsibility because I wasn't the pilot. He knew what he was doing. Yeah. But so I did that time, and I turned back around, and all of a sudden, right in front of us is a wire. Oh. And I looked at the pilot. He didn't see it. And I said, John, there's a wire. I may have used a couple of other colorful words there. But I said, John, there's a wire. And he looks at it and goes, oh, and he yanks back on the stick. And we're taxiing down, landing down, cruising in. And all of a sudden, the helicopter goes in and makes a big dive back because he pulled back the stick to pull us up. Well, it was too late, and we were too close to the wire. We caught the wire in the landing skids, and just luckily it was a PA wire, so it was, a little tiny wire for the most part. Had it been a power wire, we would have been down. I probably would have been dead or hurt really bad. So if it turns out to be a PA wire, and it was held on either side of the field on a wooden pole. So we cut this wire, and it goes zing, zing on either side. And these, if you can imagine a wooden light pole, and they didn't have lights. These didn't have lights on. It was just for the PA wire. The poles start wavering back and forth because we had the tension we had on it, had tightened up, and then it finally snapped. So the poles are waving back and forth. We go on and land. And normally when Chopper 7 lands, people were cheering for delight. Chopper 7 was bringing in the game ball. That night, people were running in terror out of the stands because they didn't know if the poles were going to collapse or what, And so I get out of the chopper with the game ball. Normally I carried it to the cheerleaders. Well, this time I carried it over the athletic director, and I handed him the game ball, and I said, I thought you said there weren't any wires up there. And he goes, yeah, I forgot about that one.
See, I've heard that, and I was wondering if that was a rumor or not. It's like,
No, it's true story.
Man.
True story. There haven't been many times in 41 years where my life has flashed before my eyes, but that was one that night. You just didn't know what the heck was going to happen, whether you were going to go down on your nose or, what happened. We just cut the wire and landed on down. So, but that's a big part of a memory in 41 years of doing this.
Mike, thank you so much for your time today. If I could ask one more favor, can you give me a stay right there?
Yeah, sure enough. It's been one of those things that when you do this job long enough and everybody asks you how long you're going to do it, you say, well, I don't know. I'm still got a few in me, but I don't have many in me. But for those of you people who have been listening and watching for 41 years, I appreciate it. And for the months ahead when I'm still going to be doing this, please stay right there.
Thank you so much, Mike. And
thanks, Lee.
This has been episode 157 of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. Talk to you again for episode 158.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. To subscribe to the podcast, please visit the leewmowen.com/podcast. From there, you can choose your favorite platform, such as Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, TuneIn, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, and many more. Interact with the podcast and host on Twitter at the Lee W. Mowen and at CindayPod. Like the Facebook page, the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast, and download the free Flick Chat app, then search for the local Cinday Sports Group to submit your future Mowen's Mailbag questions. The closing theme is Lights Go Down by Dan Hennig, provided by the YouTube Music Library Collection. This is Lee W. Mowen, and I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please join me again next week on the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast.